Earlier this month, assuming I didn't massively mess things up, I released a music video for Bring It Back, and it was an animated video. Now, the important thing about that is I created that with just me using basically AI. I was made aware of AI art creation a little while ago now. It's become kind of a buzz thing. What could I do creatively with it that wasn't being done? Animation. Can I use it to create an animated sequence? Could I take that a step further? When I started researching it and looking into it, no, not really. We're still at the stage where we can just develop an image, but we can get a really amazing image with relatively minimal effort. And then it turns out it's really hard to recreate the same kind of character over and over again, and there's all kinds of other hurdles to come over. When I was researching other people that had maybe tried this, I couldn't find anything, very simply. It seemed like I was going to be the first person to actually attempt to create animated complex sequences in this way. At the time of recording this, nobody else has made a long animated sequence, in especially the form of a music video. And I think in the future, it's going to allow someone who, me, a small independent artist, who I could never have created this before. I've done music videos in the past. You can see those on the likes of Apple Music or this channel, where I've had to hire a videographer and some actors and get it filmed and edited. My music distributor, Distrovid, they also have an add-on service called Distrovid, and that allows you to get your music videos onto the likes of Apple Music, Tidal, and even generate your own Vivo channel. You can find the Bring It Back video, for example. If you'd like to learn more about Distrovid and their Distrovid video service, check the link below for a discount off of your first year today. If I wanted to create an animated sequence, just viably isn't in the budget for what I do. I've done some other way more complex things. There are animated characters, there is facial animation and lip syncing. And these are things that the AI absolutely cannot do, but I've done it primarily just this tool here. By utilizing that, that's how I was able to create some of the more complex facial animations and lip sync, taking the generated images from the AI and then by manipulating that map onto the AI image, and then using, again, AI in here to enhance certain parts of that, like eye movement, creating extra parts that weren't part of the image initially to allow for a natural looking eye movement. Or when a mouth opens, teeth and a tongue and the internals of a mouth that weren't there in the original image need to be animated and brought into life. That's where we're using AI there. For years now, we've been using Instagram filters to do various novelty things. Now we can utilize that a lot more and bring it way further forward into creating way more complex things like I've done here. Let me explain the whole process to create various different parts of these sequences. We start in Midjourney. Midjourney is prompt-based, but there's also some essentially programming language to learn. So we're using key things like AR 16:9 to make sure we get the correct framing for the shot. Otherwise, we're going to end up with square or misframed shots and misaligned things that won't work for what we're trying to do. We need to keep the art style relatively consistent as well, especially for shorter animated sequences. So I found it quite useful to use either a reference image prompt for an art style, or to notably use an artist's name where it would reference their art style and then consistently, for the most part, be able to mimic that. Then we've got color consideration. We need to continuously tell it when and where color can be used. And there are many, many instances where this went wrong and I had to make multiple variations. That way I was able to create relatively cohesive and consistent backgrounds and environment for where I wanted the sequences of this video to take place. All in all, I created something in the region of 1,400 environment prompts to get consistently what we see throughout the course of the video. And it might seem like a lot, but if I was to try and create this, I would have to have done each one of those manually and drawn it manually and designed it manually. It's simply not feasible, but AI made that. So once we've got many of these backgrounds and environments we want to use to tell our story, we need character and people to go in it. And in some cases, I could use the same environment prompts and then use the image prompt of the environment to generate people that would then fit in it. And that's how I've done a lot of the crowds and individual standing. A good example here is the woman playing a violin. We had a lot of trouble creating a violin in the similar art style, but there's enough there with the impression and the sound to give you the idea that there's a woman standing in a busy street playing the violin. It works well. I would just like to note here, she's also animated ever so slightly, just over a couple of frames to add a little bit more movement. There's depth with the background where the background's separate and she has been removed by using a mask, and then she's animated. I used a tool from Motion VFX called M-Puppet. This allows me to add sort of an animated spline down the masked part of an image and smartly, again, kind of using AI, manipulate it so that when one area moves, the relevant attached areas would move in a cohesive way to that. And that's how many of the small, quick animations have been made to add movement and feel to the individuals that have been placed in the scenes. So far we're using AI-generated scenes with AI-generated people in scenes, and we're using masking to change their position, move them around, and have essentially a false depth of feel in an AI-generated image that we can then control. And the way I've done a lot of this focus shifting is the same process with masking, a little bit of the Motion VFX M-Puppet animation, and then on the background using something like a Gaussian blur, just keyframe to adjust slightly as if the shot was focusing as the two parts move away or shift from side to side within that same frame. When we first enter the nightclub style venue and we've got essentially our main protagonist, or that's the relationship you're supposed to feel, is dancing. That was done in a similar way that I have a couple of different backgrounds to simulate the feeling of light changing, or club lights giving a different perspective and feel as they alter, but it's actually 2 or 3 completely separate backgrounds because I couldn't generate a light change with the AI and maintain everything else in the same space. Another limitation, but we overcame it, I think, fairly well. Girl then is created separately or via various prompts and recycling to be dancing. I was then able to build an animated sequence of movement that looked like it was always the same figure and that she rotated and danced. And for a couple of frames, we even get like her hair flicking into a quick face profile before she turns back round. Now to then simulate the kind of club environment, I've very simply got pure white shots of a strobe light with various opacity changes, and they're happening just for a single frame, but they can happen in certain depth, right? So we can have it happen on the background with our main figure in front, and then we can put it in front of our main figure to simulate the light moving forward. This works really, really well. By doing this and then adding things like drop shadow into our animated characters, when the lights flash a depth of field, we can quickly add that shadow in. It's something I remember distinctly from working in venues for such a long period of time, when there's lots of smoke and lights flash and you get ghostly shadows of other people at different depths and space as the light changes. Then it's important to say the smokiness and some of the movements that are added into are all composite elements. I used lots of composite dust, film grain, smoke, light leaks as well, lasers, and then also recorded a bunch of stuff. I used a massive library called Envato Elements, which for a subscription fee lets me download everything that I can need for that project. By tying it to a project, I can then download all of those resources. All of the smoke, light leaks, film grain, etc. that was used to add feeling and movement into these frames came from Envato Elements. Now there were other things that I wanted to do in certain images that I couldn't create with the AI, but once I had my multiple layers, I could. Take this scene here, for example, where we've got our figure pursuing our protagonist or trying to find out where she now is. And in this alley scene, the lighting was fantastic, but I needed him to feel embedded in the scene. So I very simply, once we've cropped him out and placed him where we want him in the scene, we then created another shadow and skewed that and morphed it so it blends into the scene. So he creates this long casting shadow. Aspects like this across pretty much every single frame where I've added extra parts in and manipulated it using the AI as a base, using it to do my character creation, but then manipulating in the areas I can to make it unique, my own, and animated. And by using simple techniques that are just built into Final Cut, I was able to do parts like this, where we've got that additional shadow added in. So look at this shot here, for example. It's a lip sync animated sequence. The background is cut out and there's a composite layer from Envato elements. We've now got this lip sync, real music video style sequence. There's dust and kind of effects moving around. We've got a sequence with the falling cards again from Envato elements. The lip sync was created using the Mug Life app, and then she was also created as part of the AI sequence of creating that character multiple times over. And that is essentially how I'm using AI to build all of these things together. If you haven't already, you can watch the entire music video right here from start to finish and see if you can really understand how I managed to bring all of these elements together. Look forward to seeing you in future videos. Take care.